name is Yolanda McNair, YOLANDA, MCNAIR. I'm the mother of Adacia Miller. My daughter was killed one day before her 25th birthday on July 8, 2012. She was invited to a party on the weekend that she was celebrating her upcoming birthday. And depending on which witness statement you want to believe, 15 minutes or 45 minutes after she arrived, she was dead, shot by an off-duty Detroit police officer with his service weapon, with 40 witnesses, one call to 911, 25 minutes between the shot and the call. I've been fighting for the last 7 years for my daughter's justice. Adacia should be turning 32 this year, but she'll forever be 24 years, 364 days. I started an organization, Protect Our Stolen Treasures, and I help families all across this country fight for their children's justice. I don't just fight for my child, I fight for everyone.
That's right.
Yes, my name is Darlene Blevins. I'm the sister of Thurman Blevins, and he was killed on June 23rd of 2018. My brother June was out. It was a Saturday evening. He was out with his one of the mothers of his children, and they were just out chilling, enjoying themselves. And the police rolled up on him. Said that he had fit a description of someone in the area. And they got out the car aggressively, shouting, "Put your hands up." And, in that type of moment, you didn't see nothing but shock on, everyone's face in that time. And my brother took off running. And the police, they pursued him. They chased him for 2 blocks. My brother was just in complete, confusion. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't know why he was being chased. He didn't get to ask any questions. Basically just running for his life. And he came upon an alley. He went to hit the alley. And then that's when the cop just, shot him down like he was nothing. And there was 2 cops involved. The first cop was Justin Smith. The second cop was Ryan Kelly. Ryan Kelly was behind them, pursuing them as well. And he came around the corner, and my brother's already laying on the ground dying, and discharged his weapon as well. Today is my brother's birthday. He would have been 32 years old. And I miss him a lot. And I know his daughters, he had 3 daughters. He had one that was 14, one that was 10, and one that was 8. I know they miss him a lot as well. He didn't deserve to die that way. When I looked at that body cam footage and I seen the way that they shot him down like he was nothing, they didn't give him no type of medical aid or anything. I just seen him just dying there, just blood everywhere. And they kept him there for hours. It was hot, it was summertime, and his body was decomposing out there in the high heat. By the time we got to see him, he didn't even hardly look like himself anymore. And they've stolen him away from us. And I'm out here fighting for justice because I believe that everybody here that had this situation happen to them deserves justice. No one deserves to have their kid, their relative, anybody gunned down the way that they do. And I hate that it happens the way it happens out here, and I hate we have to all go through this. I never would have thought my life would be turned upside down like this. But I'm positive, I'm praying every day, and I'm out here trying to get this story out here as much as I can to fight for justice, to make a way out for everybody. And I'm hoping things will change, but it's a long haul, and it's a hard fight because these people cover up that dirty work so bad. It makes it hard for us to get that justice, and it makes it hard for us to get that prosecution. But I'm hoping that we can see a way somewhere out here, to get justice for everybody out here that's fighting. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Hope Coleman. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. My son was murdered by the Boston police. I called for ambulance, but the police came. He has schizophrenic paranoia. He was on the steps for a couple of days, and I wanted him to get be seen by the doctor. But the police came and said the ambulance. He said, I'll give it a try. I said, no, you're not giving it a try. The other guy gets out, other EMS gets out and say, we gotta protect the EMS. I said, well, I gotta protect my son. Meanwhile, the EMS came. My son wound up getting killed instead of going to the hospital. Yes, I'm pressing charges. And that's all I could say right now. But there's no justice. The cops that shot my son, they know what they did. They should have used a taser or something. My son he was quiet. I felt bad because he came out the room quietly, went in the hallway. EMS said, you gotta go. He said, no, I don't wanna go. And he raised his voice, you gotta go now. My son said no, because my son made a statement. EMS didn't like what he said. So he said, you're gonna go now. And from the deep of his voice, yelled. And then next thing you know, he burst the door open. The same two rookies that shot my son. These are the two that shot my son. They pushed the door open, not me next to my son, on the floor in the hallway, and shot him. Each one of them put a bullet in the abdomen and in the groin. And I'm yelling, getting up, what part of the body did you shoot my son? He kept yelling in my face. The detective came in there and said, get out the hall, get out the hall. He tried to make it look like I wasn't there, telling me to get out the hall. But this is why I'm here today. Kim and the rest of the mothers, we're supporting each other, the strength and power to get justice for all. And it's bad for my grandkids to even traumatize 5 of them. They're just traumatized. And me, I won't eat, I can't eat. I eat now and here, but yeah, I lost about 45 pounds or 50. But the ones that shot my son, they can sit down with their family, go on trips and enjoy holidays. Me, I go to the cemetery. I have to go to the cemetery, let my son know what's going on. And my husband, I had just buried my husband last year, made a year, December 18th. And he told me what they thought that he wasn't in the room. Make it quick. The police, they were laughing, saying, we finally got him out the way. We ain't got to worry about him no more. We did a good job. That's what they said. And they were surprised that my husband was in the other room. But this is why I'm here today, to try to get everyone, we all in the same environment. The cops are coming around killing black brothers and white, all colors. But it's not good. I mean, I grew up in, okay, I'm going to let you go ahead and talk. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matilda Smith. My son was killed by 4 St. Paul cops over on the east side of St. Paul. He was shot 49 to 52 times. And I heard on one of the radios from a police car, I heard the shooting, and I heard them tell this officer not to come, but I also heard them tell the other officer to go get the shotgun out of the car. So they shot him 49 to 52 times, and then when he got the shotgun out of the car, stood up over him, sprayed him in the chest. Not only that, his pants was pulled down to the ground. Okay, now, I just got through talking to my son before this happened to him. But when they shot him, they notified me almost 24 hours later. Not only that, but they demonized. And when BCA came to tell me, they had a smirk on their face. They talked about how many times he was shot. It devastated my family. I'm traumatized. I've had to deal medication. I've lost weight. I've gotten sick from this. And I don't deserve this as a mother. And the demonization they do, it's gay. And all this putting everything on us and our children. You killed them. We didn't kill yours, first of all. Secondly, I know your game. It's called reverse psychology. You get me before I get you. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm not going away. You killed my son, and you had the newspaper to demonize him. And you went on the news and you demonized my son. And the DA thought it was funny also. So, I'm here to get your names out. And I'm here to let the world know what St. Paul police do to their own. My son had schizophrenia, and he also had bipolar, and he also had post-traumatic stress. My son didn't always have this. He developed this from watching the shooting of his father. We went through something with that. My husband was killed by people that wanted to rob and take. And after that, Jafford became ill with his mental illnesses. Now, this here is another tragedy. I've been through the deaths of my mother and my father. Wasn't like this. My son's life was snuffed out, and I can't leave it alone. And I won't ever, until they be accountable. And what I want is accountability. And what would really stop them is they pay for every funeral of a person they killed and pay for the headstone.
My son Javis Benjamin was 20 years old. He was a student at the time. The school was Georgia Perimeter, which is now Georgia State in Atlanta, Georgia. He was a mass communication major. He loved audio engineering. He was also an artist. He did a mural at his high school for his senior class. So he was a freehand artist as well as a graffiti. Well, on the day of the incident, my son was seen by the officer in his dash cam video running a red light. He ran the red light, lost control of his car, the car he was driving, and he hit a telephone pole, head into a telephone pole. Well, the officer on his dispatch hollered out to the dispatcher stating that my son was going 120 miles an hour. He was going to go see where he was at. So he went to go look for him. Once he arrived on the scene, my son, he hit a car upon hitting the telephone pole. It smashed in the driver's side. And so he had to climb out of the car, knock the glass away, climb out of the car. And as he got out of the car, he knocked the power out in the neighborhood that he was in. When he knocked the power out, the residents started coming out of their homes. Well, when he climbed out of the car, on the video, it showed where my son had both of his hands up, and he never faced the officer. The officer was at an angle to him. He was looking at the people in the community, and he was pointing down at the officer, cell phone in one hand, this hand pointing at the officer while he engaged with the people, stating that, do y'all see this? Do y'all see what he's trying to do to me? And as my son tilted this way, he shot him in the heart, and he dropped. Well, prior to me finding out what happened, it was 2 years that it took me to find out that's what happened. Because the night of the actual shooting, I did not find out my son was dead until 6 hours later. He was actually killed that evening. When it happened, and I was informed by his father, who told me that my son was gone, he was deceased. Well, it was Martin Luther King weekend in Atlanta with everything's going on. So the medical examiner and the coroner's office, all of them was closed for the holiday weekend. So I was told that I could not identify his body until after the holiday was done. So me having to wait, and then not only that, the Georgia Bureau of Investigators explained to me that his body was evidence and that I could not see him or whatever. So that was the struggle within me as far as his siblings as well, because we went to the hospital, we went to everywhere. Well, the police department as well as the local news reported that my son assaulted the officer. I was also told that my son caused an abrasion by the representative from the department that the officer who killed my son, his name was Tom Gillis, explained to me and my sister that my son struck the officer. He had an abrasion and they had to transport him to Grady Hospital. We later found out 2 years later, none of that occurred. It took me 2 years of suffering, wondering if my son acted out at the scene. Based on the reports that was given by the local news, my son assaulted, and they charged my son at death with assaulting an officer and theft by taking. The car that he was driving, they lived in an apartment together, and they were using the car among themselves. But then it was later reported that my son was an unauthorized driver. But they stated that he carjacked somebody, stole the car, drove in the car without permission. It's a lot of information as to it applies to that car. But my focus as his mother is, I can care less about the car. That's material. I wanted to know what actually happened. And for me, the focus needs to be on the scene itself as to how my son died. Because ironically, at the time, I was in school, criminal justice major. And ironically, I had a research paper during the time of his death that I had to do on the pros and cons of dash cam videos as well as body cam videos. And in the midst of that, me knowing the dynamics, the history that applies to it, it gave me 1,000 more questions. Because I had 2 research papers at the exact time. Criminal behavior and the pros and cons of dash cam body videos as well as vehicle automated recordings. So with that being said, it raised a lot of questions. Whereas when I approached the district attorney, several attempts, each attempt was denied. I was always given, he's handling a high profile case, he would get back with me. They did not assign my son a case number, which I knew when you're doing an investigation, that's how you refer back to getting the information. They did not assign my son a case number until after the district attorney took his case before the grand jury. And that was 2 years, 2.5 months later. So I had to constantly, which each time I documented, every time I went to his office, I spoke with Amy Gillis. She was a victim witness advocate. I also spoke to a deputy DA. Her name was Odo, Miss Odo. She did each one of them on every occasion, took my name, email address, all contact information, along with my son, my oldest son, and said that someone would get in touch with me. No one never did. No one never did. So upon me approaching it, my oldest son walked through the city of Atlanta with a big poster board asking people to call the district attorney. And upon him doing that, he also became a part of the mass incarceration. It's an movement that's in Atlanta, and they did a mock tribunal in the student center at Georgia State, I don't know which school it is, and where the families whose sons were killed by police, sons or daughter, they had like a tribunal charging them, mock tribunal. So with that being said, on that same event, the attorney that I formerly had told me that the district attorney wanted to have a conversation with me. And because it became public from that event, then he scheduled for us to go before the grand jury. 2 days prior before going to the grand jury, he allowed my family, along with myself, to see the dash cam video. Upon us seeing the dash cam video, I didn't want to see it because my thing was, I didn't want to see my son suffer. I didn't want, did he cry out? Did he I didn't know what's what. So his siblings, along with my sisters, did see the video 2 days prior. I was then told by the district attorney he wanted me to give an impact statement on the behalf of my son. Well, because my family saw the video prior to the actual viewing, my daughter informed me. She was like, "Mom, I suggest you see it because then it will help you get some closure. It will answer a lot of your questions, and to know that we knew who Javis was. But now you can see that everything that's in the video contradicts what they first reported." So upon me seeing the video, upon me going to the grand jury hearing, that's when we saw the actual incident where he was pointing, never engaging with the officer, but telling them, his actual words was, "Do y'all see this shit? Do y'all see what he's trying to do to me? He's crying out. Do y'all see what he's trying to do to me?" So as he tilted, as soon as you could see in the video, as soon as he faced the officer, that's when he dropped it. So upon that argument, my discussion with the district attorney was, at what point was he being aggressive? And they stating that at the point that when he did not get back into the car, when the officer ordered him to get back in the car, that means he refused to follow through with command. So that gave him the 2 second in the state of Georgia, the 2 second rule of stand your ground. It gave him the right to shoot my son because that's where he said he feared for his life. When my son turned and faced him and looked him in the eye, he lost his rights because the officer feared. And they made it appear that this officer was this big, this little, teeny little man, and my son was this big person. I recently went to court, and me and this guy is eye to eye. But they tried the picture, the way that they took it. My oldest son, he's also in audio engineering. He does web, page, all of that stuff. He even gave the point percentage of the aspect as to how, when we did go to court, they sent in an altered video. They totally cropped out the police car. They cropped out him running to the scene because in the one we saw in the grand jury, he was packed. Gun, taser, or whatever to the side. But before my son exited directly at my son still, was interacting with the community. While he did that, you can see where he somewhat backed up. The officer did. Now, the difference in what I'm saying, I know I'm going all over the place, is prior to us seeing the video dash cam, they said that my son beat the hell out of this man, assaulted him, and that he had to get care. But it took us 2.5 years later because I kept pushing, wanting to know the truth and to know who my son was. And for the fact that I myself was in school, criminal justice, because I wanted to do forensic investigations. And with me being in school and knowing, it's like I got too many questions. So with me having the questions, they had the expectancy of me being that mother to crawl under the rock and cry and be shameful, because there was a lot of things that I had to deal with in the community, whereas I'm looked upon. My son was killed by the police because he assaulted an officer, yet it was the officer who assaulted my son. So with that being said, and to know who he was and how he impacted his own community, I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. Just like for me yesterday, to find out that I got bad news that the judge went in favor of this officer based on that little bit of information, yet they knew without deposition, we had to prove that there were 2 different videos that were turned in to the appellate court. The one we saw during the grand jury, that's the other part that I missed. When we went before the grand jury hearing, there were 6 other police-involved shootings, including my son. My son was the only case that the grand jury strongly advised indictment of the officer. The district attorney in that same day announced that the officer will be going before a criminal grand jury and he will give the date and time. He waited a year later and say he do not agree with the grand jury and that they needed to be trained in order to give a ruling in a police-involved shooting.
What?
Not only did he overturn indictment or the ruling by the advisement by the grand jury. 6 months later, the very officer who killed my son was promoted to chief of police, from a sergeant to a chief. He skipped totally through rank. So technically, they pat him on the back. It was a stab like none other to me, and to know his father was a police officer for 8 years. So to have to endure me having the passion to wanted to be a part of law enforcement, simply for the part of forensic, and because of my age, I could not become a police officer. So my thing was, let me get into the investigative side. Let me do the forensic side, because I've always been inquisitive to how something is done and the way that it was done. So now all of my energy is basically based on the fact that to know the law, to see the law, and then to have them reverse it back, whereas I'm now defining the entire situation was based on the fact that my son was criminalized simply for the color of his skin. Because even through the investigating and everybody who I spoke to, one of the officers, and I wish to God, because I was in that tunnel of pain while I was actually dealing with my son's death, basically said that they were surprised that my son did not have a history. Why did he have to have a history? And in the fact that he didn't even know who my son was when he actually shot him. So to know that and to know all the aspects of it, it's just kind of nerve-wracking. Whereas before I did go into my sunken place and I just hid under a rock, but now I'm at a place where it's bigger than me, it's bigger than my son, because I have grandsons. And I look at the fact that from the time that this happened, my daughter is a school teacher. She pulled her sons out of school simply for the fact that she understands the railroad as to how they doing our young black kids. She see how things are being done, from IEPs, all the above. And she want a better day for her kids. And it's sad that, I mean, what I will say is I'm blessed to the fact, and she's blessed to the fact that she was able to pull her kids out of school, and she's teaching them herself. But then it's also the fact that all the other kids and what they're having to do, because a lot of what was said last night, that's exactly what's going on, and that's exactly what happened to the very son that was killed. My son in 5th grade, technically, I was told to take him to the doctor and get Ritalin because he had a bad attitude, whereas my doctors basically told the teacher off, saying that she needed to do better skills. But she needed to find a better way, a challenging way. As time went on, he was able to complete and do what was necessary. And not only did he graduate, but he was actually in school. So it's like now my challenge is to be a voice, not only for me, but
they kill them. It's not us, and I want to make that clear. As mothers, and if a mother's speaking, well, white people, they need to stop. It's the judicial system that sets it up to be a racial issue. Because this is bigger than Cordale and I. And when I think about Yolanda McNair's daughter, Adacia, that's my son. Cordale is Adacia. Cordale is Jonathan Victor. Cordale is Joseph Bagard. Cordale is Jaffrey Smith. Cordale is Hardell Sherrill. That's who Cordale is. I am Yolanda McNair. I am Donna Chisace. I am Tony Bagard. I am Matilda Smith. I am Delshia Perry. I am Abby Blevins. That's who I am as a mother. And see, it's easy to put a color on it. And it is easy, and let me talk about the media. It's easy for the media to say, oh, you have Cordale Handy over here. And then you have these, you have Valerie Castile over here, which you know. What do they call her son's death? What do they call it? They don't call it like they would my son or the rest of these mothers. And the reason why I'm saying this, what is it called? They call it, I High profile. And I love Valerie. Let me be clear to say that the first mother I met when my son was gunned down, she reached out and found me. But the reason why, and Val is not big on it either. High profile. Because you know what? The media does that. The media does that. Put that name out there to say, hey, look at Philando Castile. Look at Tamir Rice. Oh, don't worry about Jaffrey Smith. Don't worry about Jonathan Victor. Don't worry about Adacia Miller. Don't worry about Cordale Handy. You got all these millions of killings by police. But we just want you all to look at the 10 over here. Let me say this. Society has to work smart and not hard. Look at the whole picture. The picture's bigger than that. Because I can promise you, before it was Philando Castile, Tamir Rice, before it was any of them, we could take it back to the days of Emmett Till. That wasn't high profile, but it should have been recognized. And so now we speak about that today, because now it's so much more, but it was happening 400 or more years ago. But black people just had to speak in silence, more or less. Just be a voice inside their head. Well, not Kimberly Andy Jones. I ain't never gonna be a voice inside my head. My voice is my choice and I choose to speak up. My silence will never ever be violence by me being mute. I'm not here to be mute. I'm not gonna do it. I put my boots on the ground. And again, it's not the destiny, it's the journey. I've met some beautiful mothers along the journey. I met some beautiful people. It's not a leap, it's not a jump, I'm a long distance runner. That's what I am. And we're gonna keep on speaking and we're gonna keep on lifting our voices so that we will not only cause an effect for the ones who can't speak, we're gonna cause an effect for the ones who refuse to listen, to open their ears. Because I can promise you this, I never wanted to be a Valerie Castile, a Matilda Smith, or Yolanda McNair, or Alicia Kirkman, or Dorothy Holmes, or Chantel Brooks, or Hope Coleman, or Tony Beak. I never wanted to be them, and some of these mothers were before me and some after me. I never wanted to come before them, and I never wanted to come after them. Although I felt for them, I cried for them, now I am them. So what do? You know, to me, I could either be a big part of the solution or a part of the problem. I already got enough problems. They killed my son, so I want to be a solution. I'm not here to be a problem. And if I am a problem, then good. Because the problem lies with you and not with us.
Yes.
Not with us. So when they can put their boots on the ground and they can choose to be a part of the solution and stop being a problem, then they'll see where we're at. But what people need to be aware, death knocks on everyone's door. Don't ever think that your door is exempt. You don't have an invisible door. It came to my door. I didn't choose it, it chose me. But now that it's chosen me, I must do something about it. Because I got children and grandchildren looking at me, and I don't want them to think that it's right for anybody to take their lives. That it's right for them to sit back in silence and watch someone being executed by police. I want them to know, if no one else believes in it, if you believe in it, you fight. That's what my mother told me. You fight. You don't have to stand down. If you believe in it and if you know it to be right, you fight. I've been a fighter all my life. So let me just say, I ain't got to swing with my hands. I know how to swing with my words. And sometimes I know how to just sit in my silence. Because some things you don't even have to talk about. Some things you can just sit there and you can just be quiet. Because see, one thing about the enemy, he don't know what you're thinking when you're quiet. But when I do come out swinging with my voice, duck, because you're going to get hit with words. You're going to get hit with words. And it's just not me. Let me tell you something. I stand with a strong force of sisters. a strong force. Every day we're out here, boots on the ground. Another sister has joined us. Another sister has joined us in the fucked up sorority. Just let's just call it what it is, because it's fucked up. We're not fucked up, the system is fucked up. But we here to fuck up some shit. But believe that. We here to fuck up some shit. We ain't here to just sit and wallow in our pity, because it gets us nothing. But you know what? And more mothers don't wake up, this is what it's gonna get them. It's gonna get them, everyone in this room. They'll be joining us. See, you can either fight now while your child is still living and breathing and save lives, perhaps your own child's life, or you can stand with us.
Police officer drives up and blocks them from exiting the fire station. The officer gets out of his patrol car with his gun already drawn, and he comes up to the car where Gary's sitting on the window ledge and puts that gun to Gary's head and grabs him by the collar of his shirt. When he pulls Gary off of the car, Gary is stumbling back to get his balance, and another officer came and made one fatal gunshot wound to Gary's chest, killing him. Gary's friends ran to his aid that day, and they were trying to apply pressure to the wound, and one of the paramedics, and I'm told this, I wasn't there, so some of the eyewitnesses and through depositions, I'm learning a lot what happened that I learned, that is, a lot that had happened that particular night. So she's trying to apply pressure to the wound when a paramedic from the fire station, which is where the dance was held, pulls him from her arms and pulls him to the side of the road and left him there, rendered no aid. So we hear a lot of these stories all the time about our loved ones are just left there just to die. Gary was no different. And I'm not sure if I gave the date, but this was November 27th, 1999. I'm going into my 20th year. Nothing has changed. It happened before Gary, it's happened after Gary, and it's continuing to happen. I'm not going to go into a long dissertation about the story in the interest of time, but what I will say is that there was no justice served in my son's case, as there has been no justice in the thousands of cases we've heard across this country and beyond. There is a war against our children. There is a war against our loved ones. And that we as a people need to rise up and fight against this injustice system, that we're paying these law enforcement officers to serve and protect us, and all the laws are doing is serving and protecting them. And again, until we rise up as a people, come together to say that we are no longer going to tolerate them murdering our loved ones, nothing is going to change. I made a decision as a mother almost 20 years ago that I will not sit silent. That this is not about Gary, it's greater than Gary. And I know that I have been chosen to do this. I also know that it's not going to happen soon. But I'm building a foundation that I know that the millennials, if you will, or even those after them, can take the torch and carry it forward so that they and our future can live a better life than those are living today. Thank you.
I'm Donna Gisace. My son is Jonathan Victor. He was killed in Baldwin County, or by the Baldwin County Sheriff's Department in Alabama. He succumbed to his injuries May 13th, 2017, the day before Mother's Day. Jonathan had left our house. First, I'll tell you, my son was a very outgoing person. He always liked to try different things, always brought us places to try different foods. Since we're from New Orleans, like there's just so many different restaurants. He loved to travel. He was a college, he graduated from high school, went 4 years of college for finance and management, and he ended up selling eyewear for 9 years as a high-end luxury eyewear salesperson. So Jonathan was on the road a lot for his job position. Jonathan had left our home in Louisiana, and he was traveling to Florida. He ran, the weather was bad that day. It was raining from New Orleans all the way to Florida. He either hydroplaned, and there was also some Facebook postings that someone might have ran him off the road. How his accident actually happened, I do not know. But when he ran off of the road, he landed into the marshland. When he landed in the marshland, his car was pinned between the trees and the bushes, and he was trapped driver's side, so there was no way that he could get out, and he was passed out in the vehicle. When fire arrived, the volunteer fire department arrived. They tried to help him. He didn't want to get out of the vehicle when he woke. He refused treatment from them, but then the volunteer fire department, somehow along the line, they started accusing him of having a weapon. So it was later discovered from the evidence report that his driver's license, his wallet was found on the driver's seat. There was no weapon. I will say Jonathan had no drugs. He didn't do drugs. He had no criminal record. The sheriff said that there was no criminal activity that day, and there was no alcohol in his system, according to toxology. The volunteer fire department had said that Jonathan was ETOH, which is basically the term they use for being intoxicated. And so the call escalated from being a normal call to where he was now classified as a man that was intoxicated and had a weapon. So SWAT team came out. When the SWAT team arrived, Jonathan exited out of the passenger vehicle into the marshland, which was deep mud and water. By the time he walked up out of the, it's like that was a ditch area, approaching towards which he was ordered out of the vehicle, but they say that he came out of the vehicle in a tactical stance, but there was no way that you could stand any different in that mud anyway, because the mud was sinking him in the ground. And I've been out there, so I know what it was like for him that day. He fell behind, not physically fell, but in the video from the citizen that was 40 yards away, you see him go behind the fire truck where you can't see him anymore, and the Corporal Matthew Hunniday steps up, and you don't see any more of what actually happened, but that is when his AR-556 shot my son 6 times. He did not die at the scene. Well, he did die at the scene, but they resuscitated him. And they had Lifecopter came, gave him 80 milligrams of ketamine, which later the DA used in the grand jury statement as saying that my son had taken ketamine himself, ketamine, and he did not take ketamine himself. He was given it by Chad Jones at 1833, 80 milligrams. So they took Jonathan then at that point and flew him to the farthest hospital instead of the hospital that was 5 minutes away. And he ended up succumbing to his injuries about 8 hours after he was shot. So my youngest son and my oldest son and my daughter-in-law watched when we finally arrived, which was very difficult for us to find out exactly where he was, because they sent him unidentified when they knew who he was, because they had called my home multiple times after he was shot, but they did not say that he was shot when they were calling. They were saying a lot of other accusations, even as far as accusing him, asking me if he had killed anybody at the home, which later just, the sheriff comes out and says that erroneous statements were made to the family. Maybe possibly even the one that someone stole his vehicle and it wasn't Jonathan in the vehicle, then later they called back and said it was Jonathan in the vehicle. So the timeline of different accusations that I have just from that night was enough in myself to say something wasn't right here. Baldwin County has refused to answer our FOIA request on October 16th, 2017. The sheriff was found, the deputy was not charged. He was found justified. And the case was closed, but we have not been allowed to view any of the unedited videos. I do not have a full autopsy with photos, details. I have no photos of the crime scene, of the incident scene, not crime scene, but accident scene. It's a crime to me, but to them, I guess they feel like it's not a crime. And it's a crime because I feel like Baldwin County killed my son or murdered him. Something went wrong that day. My son needed help, and they failed him, and they didn't help him. Can I show? I wrote, and Jonathan's signature is on the back of his shirt, on the back of my shirt. So I'm gonna. And that's basically the story right there on the back of the shirt in a more simplified version.
Along my apartment complex, and somewhere or another along the ride, my son dropped his hat. He was on the way to the gas station, and his hat flew off. So he turned around to get the hat, and at the time, he was an off-duty Prince George's County police officer working security in my complex. He began to follow my son. So he called in the bike, whatever, and the bike, he claimed that the bike was involved in a robbery 8 weeks prior. My son kept on riding, so the police started chasing him. And the police officer called in the bike, gave a description of the bike, and dispatch told this man that the bike that he described wasn't the bike they were looking for, and to fall back. But this police officer continued to chase my son on the wrong side of the street on the median, chased them a mile out of Maryland into DC. My son crashed into a tree. He lost control of the bike, crashed to the tree, and he was medevac to the hospital. I'm gonna back it up a little bit. Before my son, the paramedics and law enforcement, everybody got to the scene, this police officer, my son crashed, him and his cousin were on the street. This police officer pulled up on the scene after my son crashed, looked at my son on the street, and it's caught on tape. He looked at my son on the street, got back in his car and pulled off, rendered no aid to my son. My son had his femur bone out of his leg, his neck was broke, his back was broke, every bone on the right side of his head was crushed, his pelvic bones were crushed, he was just broken. And this police officer went back to my apartment complex, wrote his report out that he chased a dirt bike, but the bike fled into Washington, D.C., period. He didn't acknowledge the fact that he went into D.C., he saw my son on the scene, he didn't put on there that my son was hurt, he just left him there. He didn't even help. Who's to say that if he had attempted to help my son, some chance he might have survived because he bled so bad out at the scene. When I got to the hospital, my son was already in surgery. They had to immediately give him 50 pints of blood. And to repair the bone, they had repaired the bone, his femur bone outside of his leg. They had to attach it outside of his leg because he had so many other injuries that he had to tend to. And my son was on life support. He was in surgery throughout the whole time, the 2 times that he was at the hospital. And at the time, when I got to the hospital, I didn't even know anything about the chase. I didn't know what happened. I just thought he crashed on a dirt bike. I didn't know anything about the police involvement until the vehicular homicide unit showed up at the hospital and started explaining to me what was going on. I'm like, vehicular homicide? My son isn't dead. So in my heart, I knew that was bad. anytime they showing up to interview me. But the doctors came out and told me, my son, they was like, we've done everything we can for your son. And so basically, we needed you to take him off life support. I told him, kiss my ass, I wasn't taking him off nothing. And I told him if it was up to God, he was going to take him, and his death wouldn't be in my hands. I just couldn't take him off life support. I couldn't do it. So, and I said, if it's God's will, it's going to be done, you know. So that's exactly what happened. He had another surgery the second day he was at the hospital because he started bleeding real bad because his body was rejecting all the blood that they were giving to him. And he succumbed to his injuries on August 6, 2014. Nothing was done to this police officer. He's still working. He was on desk duty for a couple weeks after the incident happened. But to make a long story short, my son should be here. He shouldn't be dead. And this police officer he should have been held accountable because he was wrong, because he lied. And I say all the time, how could you leave a child? My son wasn't a grown man, he was a child. How could you leave a child in the street like that? And I'd say like an animal, but then I thought, animals are treated better than that. That was a human being. Whether he was on duty or off duty, he should have helped my son. And even if you were wrong, face the consequences. You did wrong, help him. He didn't do anything to help my son. And my son's cousin was on the bike with him also. Right now, my cousin, he has broken bones in both arms. Both his arms were like dangling. So he has rods in his arms now. He has to take medicine now because he has seizures. This police officer did so much damage to so many families. And it hurts the most because like other mothers, these police aren't held accountable. And a lot of moms I met, they're due to gun violence, but there's so many other ways our children were taken by law enforcement. And that nobody's held accountable. And we can all sit here and say that if the stories were reversed and those police officers would be dead, our children would be locked up. They'll probably be getting their ass beat in jail by other police officers, you know? But it's sad that these police officers are continuing to get away with this stuff. And that's why we're all out here and we're taking a stand. I don't care if it's 20, 30 years from now, you're going to still hear about Amir Brooks because I'm going to continue to keep his name out there to help more generations, you know, get through this stuff. And we need to get out here and educate more kids, like Mary Marion said, get to these schools to help prevent this stuff, get them stuff, you know, share our stories with the schools because we share with other mothers all the time. They don't need to keep hearing it. We need to put this in the ears of people that not going through this so they won't have to be sitting in our shoes. And like I said, I just wouldn't wish this on anybody. And we're here to make a change.